Hey folks, I was watching a Randy Schartiger video last night. One of the few folks I watch, guitar folks I watch on YouTube. I've mentioned a few on my previous videos, and I think he's one of the best luthiers on YouTube. I like watching his repair work. And I use the word luthier on purpose because he did a video that he talks about the difference between luthiers and guitar techs, and he aligns himself firmly as a with the guitar techs because the definition of luthier to him is someone who makes instruments. Now, my only training came on the violin cello side. I worked with luthiers and learned from them in an old-time violin shop. And my understanding of the word luthier, which comes from the word lute, of course, which was a more predominant instrument in the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th century than a guitar. And a lot of guitar work was written for, well, it's now transcribed for guitar, but it was written for lute. But my understanding of the word is someone who either builds or repairs or restores stringed instruments, plucked string instruments and bowed string instruments. So I would very much qualify Randy and people like him and myself as a luthier. I don't make instruments, neither does he. I'm a restoration luthier. I work on all kinds of stringed instrument projects. Now, 9 out of 10 things I do are just guitar setups. You know, just setting up action, you know, nuts, playing with truss rods, just doing setup stuff. And if that's all I did, I'd be a guitar tech. But I do full restorations, not as often as I used to, but I occasionally pull tops off violins, cellos, and do full restorations, working with the wood. I've done a few extensive guitar restorations where I'm working on the internal, the inside part, including this one here, the inside part of the guitar. I'm working the wood. I'm taking the guitar apart, I'm working with the joinery, I'm reinforcing, I'm cleating, I'm making new braces, you know, I'm inside the guitar, I'm working internally on the construction of the guitar. And to me that constitutes lutherie. Whereas if all I did was set up and cleaning up frets, then I would definitely call myself a guitar tech. So it's an interesting distinction. I think I have to disagree with his definition of that. I feel that I've seen him do some very extensive guitar work, including taking necks off of guitars or heating the glue so he can pry a neck or a fretboard off, and then redoing a dovetail joint. Now, guitar tech doesn't do that. Guitar tech doesn't generally get that far into any sort of restoration. I mean, they're just doing setup stuff. Not to say there is no crossover. There is a lot of crossover. There are a lot of guitar techs who can do or were trained to do more difficult interior repairs, but who choose not to, who make their bread and butter by doing adjustments, lots of them, often going out on the road and being a tech for a band or a performer or something like that. And occasionally they will dabble in a more extensive restoration. And then there are a lot of luthiers that do, most of the time, do setups and take on the occasional project, which is sort of, defines basically what I'm doing these days. Most of the time I'm in my workshop, I'm setting up guitars. But I do buy and find guitars in all conditions, and have to do some extensive restorations here and there. I still, I love working on cellos actually, and I still take on 2 or 3 cello restorations a year. A lot of which involves prying the top off because they're glued with hide glue, and either working on something broken inside, or a crack on the top or in the sides, or some other major construction issue. Occasionally I take guitars apart. I work far more on acoustic instruments because that's sort of where my training and experience comes. I do dabble with electrics. I prefer working with wood to working with electronics. I do probably 10 to 1 acoustic to electric instruments, probably even more than that actually. But I just thought it was an interesting distinction. What do you think? What do you think is the line between a guitar tech and a luthier? I think it's often blurred, but I don't think it's as cut and dried as a luthier is only someone who makes instruments. When I trained, or when I worked with violin family luthiers, they did make instruments, but 90% of the time they were repairing and restoring old ones. And some of the restorations of 17th, 18th, 19th century violins, or cellos, or double basses, or violas, were as sophisticated, sometimes even more difficult, they would say, than making a fresh instrument. Because it's always harder to take somebody else's work apart and fix it or rework it than just starting from scratch and doing it to your own specifications. At least that's what a lot of them would say. So they would consider that restoration work very much Luthier in the Luthier tradition. There are a lot of YouTubers who only, you watch them and they only do setup. They only ever set up guitars. And if they ever ran into a neck reset or something like that, they would find someone else to do it because they don't have the know-how and the skill or the confidence. Doing a neck reset is a bloody difficult job. And, you wouldn't just launch into a Martin neck reset unless you had some confidence and experience in doing that sort of work. Even a beginning luthier might take that job to a more experienced luthier. So, and it's the same in the violin world. You work on your Asian or German student instruments, but if you come across an Italian violin or a French violin, like a Degani or a Bernadelle, or something of vintage, you might leave that to a more experienced luthier. I've seen a lot of violins and cellos ruined by folks that probably weren't at that level to take it on. And of course, in the world of instrument repair, there are stunning craftsmen and there are hacks, and there are people that probably shouldn't be taking instruments apart and trying to fix them. You find, most of the time I work on guitars, I'm fixing somebody else's repair that went wrong. Especially with student instruments. You get all kinds of people trying to repair a guitar, and they repair it as they would a cabinet or a piece of furniture. They use the wrong glue, they use the wrong techniques, they don't clamp, various things. You see lots of things when you're repairing instruments. You see the signature of a lot of bad repairmen that have gone before you. So it's a world fraught with variants, and I think that people do extensive restorations and bring guitars back from the dead. People like Mr. Schartiger, who I've seen work on quite a few vintage instruments in the guitar world. For my money, he and his ilk are Luthiers, and the folks that just do setup are guitar techs. So that's my take on it. I'd be interested to see what you think in the comments below. I'll see you next time.